Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us for the 2021 celebration of National Girls and Women Sports Day. My name is Kat Alves. I'm the Deputy Director of Athletics, Recreation, and Intramurals here at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Every year, this celebration inspires girls and women to play and be active and to realize their full potential and their power. Perhaps more than ever, we know how important it is to stay mentally and physically healthy. It was not too long ago that girls and women were not allowed, encouraged, or enabled to play sports and be active. This event reminds us to remember the history of stark inequities, applaud the progress that has been made, and to look deeply at what work is still left to do. Thank you all for joining us. I want to start off with a few facts for you. We know times have changed, but perhaps not as fast as we'd like. For instance, 40% of teen girls do not participate in sports, compared to only 25% of teen boys. 90% of colleges do not offer athletic opportunity to female athletes proportional to their enrollment. 24% of all head coaches at the college level are women. And yet we celebrate many successes too. The 2016 Olympics had 292 women competing for the United States, which is the largest amount in Olympic history for the United States. As we'll see, one of our panelists today, Ariana Vanderpull Wallace, broke down barriers herself, representing the Bahamas in women's swimming in 3 straight Olympics, with finals appearances in 2012 and 2016. This year, women have risen to leadership positions in male professional sports, including the NFL, MLB, and NBA, in coaching and officiating. But here's why we need to continue striving and keeping girls and women at the forefront of discussions and work around sport and play. We know physical fitness contributes to health and well-being, lower obesity and blood pressure, and higher levels of cardiorespiratory fitness. We know that socially, sport and play bring a stronger sense of belonging, improved self-esteem, and reduced symptoms of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and stress. Finally, we know from an academic and a leadership perspective, girls who participate in sport have higher high school graduation rates, college attendance, and opportunities for leadership, civic engagement, and lifelong success. That's why I'm so excited we've convened this panel today to discuss where we've been, what we've achieved, and where we're going. So I hope you're looking forward to that discussion just as much as I am. And with that, I'd like to start introducing our panel. First, we have Shanae Joy Jones, who is founder of Grow Our Game, whose mission is empowering the next generation of women leaders through basketball, passion, confidence, and community impact. With over 15 years of coaching experience, Shanae continues to serve as a committed and dedicated professional through community organizations in New York City, primarily facilitating and leading efforts to break generational poverty by advocating for our youth in urban communities. She's a mentor to all of her players, past and present, and continues to advocate for girls' participation in sports. Coach Jones was named 2020 New York Knicks Junior Knicks Coach of the Year, and most recently featured in Nike's You Can't Stop Our Voice campaign for her profound impact in the New York City basketball community. Welcome, Shanae. Next, we have Emma Randall, who is the Director of High School Programming and head girls coach for Beat the Streets New York, and was a member of Team USA's coaching staff from 2012 to 2018. She was a coach for the 2016 Olympic Games in Rio and has been coach of numerous world teams at all age levels. Emma earned her BA and MS in sports psychology from Lock Haven University, where she competed for the team and wrestled on the senior circuit. In 2016, Randall earned her USA Wrestling Gold Level coaching certification. And through her own business, Evolve Leadership and Performance Training, she's dedicated to the growth and development of females and coaches in sports. Welcome, Emma. Last but certainly not least, we have Ariana Vanderpull Wallace, who is a sprint freestyle specialist from the Bahamas. She graduated from Auburn University, where she was a multi-time All-American and 3-time NCAA champion. Vanderpull Wallace is a national record holder from the Bahamas who has represented her country in international championships, including the Olympics, FINA World Championships, and Pan American Games. She swam for the Bahamas at the 2008, 2012, and 2016 Olympics. When she made the finals in the 50-meter distance in 2012, Vanderpull Wallace made history as the first Bahamian woman to make the finals of a swim event at the Olympics. She's also honored with the Bahamas Senior Swimmer of the Year in 2015. Ladies, thank you so much. I'm also joined today by our aquatics director and head women's swimming coach, Janelle Stott-Hodge, who will co-moderate with me. So Janelle, did we make all of your swimming dreams come true with Ariana here or what? So get us started with our first question. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And so as a way of introducing yourselves, we'll start with one question for each of you individually. Let's start with Shanae. What was it like being a student athlete? I'm sorry. What did you feel could have been better throughout your basketball journey as a young athlete? And how did that experience inspire you to start growing our game?
Sure. So I would definitely like to say that despite John Jay, I'm not a John Jay alum. I'm a New York University alum, but you guys are like, a little bit uptown from us. I can say that as a student athlete, right, in college, the biggest piece for me and the one piece that I really regret from my experience, which I had an amazing experience at NYU, but the one thing I can say is that I wish I was able to study abroad. And I think that for many student athletes, there is a very interesting draw, right, with this like global connection and wanting opportunities to travel. And so for sure, it's something that I was able to do when I became a professional and established my career. But the other piece I can say is with respect to starting Grow Our Game, the reason why I decided to even go into creating Grow Our Game was largely because there just simply weren't enough resources that existed here in New York City that were free of charge and exclusively available for girls, right? And so again, while my playing experience was quite different and it didn't necessarily have me with this idea of creating Grow Our Game at that time, over the years of coaching, there was definitely a clear disconnect, right? With young girls and engagement at a very young level. At a very young age. And again, pay to play options are pretty much all you have here in New York City for kids at that age to begin with. So that's why Grow Our Game started. That was the birth of it. And we've been pretty strong for the last 2 years.
Awesome. That's great. Emma, what was it like being a student athlete in wrestling while kind of simultaneously studying sports psychology? And were you able to make the references between your experiences and your studies? And did those connections kind of help you excel?
Thanks for having us on. I'm excited to share. Sports psychology was great for me. But when you think about it, I started wrestling when I was like 8 years old. And I had been practicing wrestling, and I entered college at 18, right? So I had 10 years of wrestling skills, and I had 0 years of sports psychology skills. And we over-focused on this physical training and the tactical and technical side of it, and I had zero ability to cope with the pressure of college. I went from a multi-sport athlete to focusing on one thing. I went from my comfort in my normal zone to a completely new environment. And so I was under all these stresses, and as a freshman, you're kind of like, I'll just listen and learn from everybody else. But my sophomore year, I became a captain. And that's when I really started taking those sports psychology classes. And it was a great ability for me to be like, wow, this is parallel to what I'm experiencing right now, this performance anxiety. I'm experiencing it. I'm feeling it. I can see what I need to do. But I had 11 years of wrestling at that time, and I had zero still of sports psychology. And so it was this unfair balance where I knew how to help myself, but I couldn't help myself because there wasn't enough time for me to practice. And so I really spent a lot of time in the classroom figuring out how to put words to my experience and figure out what small steps I could take every single day and build into my practice. But it wasn't enough to overcompensate. So I don't feel like it super helped my wrestling career. The way I think it did help me is when I became a member of Team USA's coaching staff, I felt inadequate. I was like, I was never a world champion. I was never, on Team USA representing it with the flag on my chest, And so I was like, how can I give to these girls who are older than me, because I was 21 at the time, How could I give knowledge to them that an experience that I haven't been through myself? And so the one thing that set me apart and provided me that source of confidence in my ability to give to others was those sports psychology skills. And I took what I knew and I helped our senior level girls and our Olympic level girls, but I also, as like the head development coach, was like, these are going to be taught to our 13, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds. It's going to be a part of every single camp, a part of every single practice, because we cannot let them get to this age where they don't have enough time to truly practice and hone those skills. If we want Olympic medals, then it starts long before. And so that's how the two kind of interacted in my sport experience.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. Ariana, how does it feel to be the most decorated Bahamian woman in swimming? And what was it like to be the first Bahamian woman to make Olympics in general, knowing that you made history?
Sorry, you would swear like after months and months of Zoom, I would know how to work this. I still don't. I want to say thank you for having me at first. I was honored to be part of this panel, so thank you. And to answer your question, what I think is really cool, and since we're celebrating women and girls in sports, I was actually the first Bahamian swimmer, period, to make the finals at the Olympics. So that was really exciting. I went in kind of with role models from the Bahamas that had made the Olympic team, and they were going fast times and national records. And but once they got to the Olympics, they just weren't able to see kind of get to that next level. So it was really awesome to be able to experience making the final. And it's funny because a lot of times I'm sitting down and I'm talking to swimmers that weren't even alive when I went to my first Olympic Games. And when I'm talking to them, they know who I am. And I've had parents that have come up to me and say, my daughter with you and she really wants to get into swimming because of you. And that's when I realized like the impact that I had. I think while you're going through a sport, you don't truly understand like what's happening in the moment. And I wish I had, because I wish I could have looked back. I wish in the time I could have looked within and been like, this is really amazing, this experience that I'm having. But now I've been retired for the last 5 years. And so it's really cool to continue to be able to look back and have people continue to reach out to me and be able to give back to a sport that gave me so much within it. And as a female in a sport and as a Black woman in a sport where not a lot of African Americans are, it definitely was a really interesting journey and an experience that I hold very near and dear to my heart.
Great, thank you so much. So I have a question for all of you to answer. You guys know on National Girls and Women in Sport Day, we're reminded to lead her forward. That's our thing this year. So in your respective sports, did you have an inspiring female role model that looked like you or led you forward? And if so, what kind of impact did that have on you? And if not, did that lack of representation inspire you to be a role model for young women in sports today? So why don't we start with Ariana and then Emma and Shanae.
So like I said kind of earlier, for me, I actually didn't realize that like women and especially African-American women were a minority in a sport. Growing up in a country like the Bahamas, the majority of our population is Black African-American. And so I never really was introduced to this idea until I went to boarding school when I was 15. And I was kind of taken aback. And because all of my role models in the Bahamas were women of color, and my mom swam, and then Nakia DeVoe, who went to the 2004 Olympics, was the first woman to make the Olympics team in swimming. So she was kind of my role model. And when I saw her make the team, I was like, oh, well, I guess it is possible for me to do that. And it's crazy looking back that 2004 was the first time that a woman had made the Olympic team for the Bahamas. And just like how far we've come from there. I mean, I think 2016, there was 2 girls and a guy. So it's really grown as a sport. And so growing up in a country where I was kind of insulated, swimming with other Caribbean teams, I didn't understand what the difference was. To me, it was like, well, we're all people of color. And then going to boarding school and realizing that, first of all, most girls end up dropping out of swimming, unfortunately, just because like they don't want to deal with the being in the pool all the time, or they want to do something else. So there are a lot of swimming females that don't end up making it. So it's really cool to know that as we continue to grow as a sport, women are kind of overcoming the men, and you're hearing more about the women in swimming than you are about the men in swimming. So that's really cool for me.
Yeah, for sure. Emma?
I grew up in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, between two farms, on our own farm. So as you can imagine, there was not a lot of female wrestling going on. I started when I was super young. I didn't meet another female wrestler until I was in high school. So I always felt like something was wrong with me for wanting to join that sport. And I did join that sport because my brother was my role model and I wanted to be like him. I wanted to be good, athletics like him. And it took a long time. When I first met another girl, I was like, oh, at least she's a weirdo too. You know, I'm not alone in this. And I realized as my world started expanding, you know, as you move from like that regional and local competition to more state tournaments and national tournaments, I started to realize that there are more opportunities and there are more women like me, and I felt more accepted. I still didn't really have a role model because women's wrestling wasn't in the Olympics. When it finally did become an Olympic sport, I had gone to Lock Haven, and one of our former wrestlers there was competing in the Olympics, and she was an Olympic silver medalist. And so she became my role model because at that point in time, I still saw myself as an athlete. When I retired from sport, I knew I wanted to coach. I knew I wanted to be involved, and I couldn't find a female coach to be my role model. I will say I was lucky enough to have our head national team coach, who's an amazing guy. He lined me up with some former women who represented Team USA in the early 90s. And so I got to meet them, and they became role models to me as they were giving back in their local communities. It was still a little bit different. They were coaching youth sport, and I was out there struggling to coach a national team. But for a long time, it was really hard for me to identify a female who looked like me, who was in the same shoes that I was in. But I do think it's advanced in an amazing amount of time recently. There's a ton of women who are coaching, a ton of women who are competing. It's one of the fastest growing sports in the US. And so I think we're doing a better job of making our role models visible through social media. It's more accessible. You can watch YouTube matches. They're constantly streaming all of these different prize fights. That's where I am right now. I'm in Iowa for a competition. But yeah, I think the access to role models would have changed my life probably tremendously. I probably would have had a sense of confidence and self-worth at a younger age and felt more at ease in our own sport, you know, because I do love the wrestling room. It's my home, but it still felt uncomfortable from 8 to 18 until I really felt like this is where I belong.
Okay, so I think that for myself, I was really lucky, and I definitely would consider myself an outlier with respect to that. My first ever basketball coach, when I first started playing CYO basketball back in elementary school, was a woman. And it was not only just a woman, but it was a woman of color, and her sister was a woman of color as well, and that was her assistant coach. So that was my first orientation ever to the game of basketball, and looking at these two, like, amazing women, and they were super tall, but looking at them and being like, okay, I don't know what the heck I'm doing, but they're kind of cool, right? And so I think that that was a big piece for me to my orientation to just basketball. And again, I was lucky enough that from there, as I continued on in middle school, I had a women's basketball coach. When I continued on into AAU, my first ever coach was Wanda Camps, and that was another really big player in New York City from a couple years before, but that was my AAU coach, first ever AAU coach. High school, Carla Nasso, Flushing High School was my high school coach. And again, that was a woman. And then when I went into college, I think that the bigger piece for me was my decision, right? My decision to go to NYU wasn't just because of the college and all that it had to offer, but it was because of Janice Quinn, who was the head coach and still currently the senior athletics director at NYU right now. And she was just like, she's like the mother of mothers, like I call her my second mother. But again, I was just lucky enough that my experience has always been with amazing women. And again, for my experience to actually have a woman so early on in my my playing career, that's just a very unique experience. But we need more young girls, especially college girls that are out there. We need you guys getting into coaching because it's not looking so good, the numbers.
Agree. We definitely need some more women on our team. So for some in the audience, it may be a given that their sport was available in their neighborhoods, but we know has not always been the case growing up. And so how accessible were teams and sports facilities for you growing up, and how did you deal with that? We can start with Shanae, and then Ariana, and then Emma.
So it seems like there's this underground world of access to gyms here in New York City. I don't know what it's like anywhere else, but in New York City, it seems like it's like, you know, you have to kind of give a 6-pack to the janitor, or you kind of have to like figure out a friend of a friend of a friend that can get you access. It's so ridiculous. It's one of the things that I'm really advocating for change with here in the city. But when I was younger, for whatever reason, it seemed like there were 50 million gyms available, right? And again, I don't know if it's because youth sports has now monetized so much into pay to play, and so everyone just wants money. But I definitely feel like even now, like in the pandemic, right? It's like renegade sports happening. Like we know that it's not supposed to be things going on, but there's still things going on, right? And so again, when I talk about that underground world, like we're actually starting to see a lot of that now more than ever, largely because, you know, it's so terribly hard to get access to gym space.
I would say for me, growing up in the Bahamas, there's access to swimming pools, and it's kind of like when you think about like the topic of food deserts. So swimming pools are very accessible if you were in the correct neighborhood. But unfortunately, if you were not in the correct neighborhood, and for us in the Bahamas, private school and public school isn't really the same as it is in America. Like the majority of Bahamians tend to go to private school, and then there's a big group of swimmers that go, or big group of students that go to public schools, and those public kids do not have access to pools. So if you ask somebody from there, they would say, absolutely, there's no access for me to get into that sport. And since I've been swimming, and there are several coaches in the Bahamas that are making it very, very, very easy and accessible for public school swimmers to get into the sport. Unfortunately, it's not a very cheap sport to continue on in. Like, to learn how to swim is one thing, but if you want to continue on in the efforts to becoming a swimmer, it's not really cheap to get all the equipment and the swimwear. So working on like getting sponsorships and products donated is a very big part of the swimming community. And then once I moved to the US, it's pretty much the same. Swimming is highly regarded as a rich people sport, for lack of a better term. And so you find the same cases. It's super easy to find a pool if you're in the correct neighborhoods. You have a neighborhood pool, or you cannot go down to the Y really easily. But unfortunately for some people, it's just not accessible. You don't have the transportation to get there. And then you need the equipment once you're there. So there are a lot of people that are working on making that way more accessible. And especially for females, it's not super comfortable. You're unfortunately basically half naked. So it's about being comfortable around who you are. You don't want to go and swim at a random pool. But there are several people that are really making it a priority to make it as accessible as possible moving forward. And I'm really excited for the sport moving forward.
Yeah, for me, I was super lucky as a kid. We always had a wrestling room in our community. It wasn't always unlocked, but I knew who to call to get unlocked and get access to it. And so thankfully, I always felt like it was there for me. And also, my parents could drop me off in our small town, and I could walk from our wrestling room and do a workout in the morning, and then walk over to the tennis courts and play around with them, and then go over to the basketball court. And so I loved that. I loved that we had access to those facilities. But I don't see the same in my career here in New York City. There's probably less than 10 true wrestling rooms accessible to the public. If you want some sort of a wrestling mat, you could go to an MMA gym, which costs money again. So with Beat the Streets, we have purchased over 100 mats and put them in schools. But unfortunately, due to lack of space, those mats are rolled up and placed in weird places and stored during the school day. And then those kids have to pick them up, carry them, put them down in the cafeteria, in the hallway, wherever there's space. and they're only allowed that 90 minutes or 2 hours of actual practice. It's not like a place where like, hey, it's Saturday morning, man, I'd love to get a good workout in. And so it's just not accessible. It's not available to them. I will say though, the pandemic has been kind of eye-opening. We haven't been on a wrestling mat since March 8th. But that hasn't stopped us from wrestling in our homes every single day. We've built partners out of towels and pillows and sweatpants. We've been gut wrenching with socks and t-shirts and pillows. We've been working on stance in motion and moving our partner that's a towel. And so we've been super creative that way and realized that wrestling is accessible if we truly decide to be resourceful enough. However, we'll see how that carries out performance-wise next year. But it is nice to know that we're still physically active. We're still pushing. The other piece of access I would say is the equipment. Most coaches and teams do not have women cut singlets, and my school was not willing to pay for one. And so until I went to college, I never once wrestled in a women's cut singlet, which means that it was a deep scoop neck, that it was deep underneath the armpits. And so I always had to wear something underneath of my singlet, but I also had to pay for that. And because I had long hair at the time, and according to wrestling rules, you have to have a cap on your head. And so I had to pay for that. And so those are kind of barriers. Even a sports bra is a barrier. And so within Beat the Streets, we work really hard to partner with different organizations like the Sports Bra Project to get sports bras for all of our girls, and they're incorporated in their equipment that goes out to them, making sure that we get discounted women's cut singlets. We've changed the rules, and so you can wrestle in a t-shirt and shorts, so that if you're uncomfortable and spandex clinging to your body, that's fine. Wrestle in whatever is comfortable for you. Same thing with hijabs, working with Nike to get some of those donated, and longlets and different pieces of spandex. And then even just working with Team USA, every time that they have leftover singlets, putting them back into the community. And so those women's cut singlets don't go to waste, to get reused. And I think that makes the sport more accessible, not only to have a mat, but also to feel comfortable and able to compete.
Talk about taking things for granted. We were thinking about facilities, and then there's just so many other things required to be part of a sport, and then better yet, to be competitive in that sport. So guys, thank you so much for sharing that. We want to talk a little bit more about your communities, and I know you touched on it perhaps in your role models and in your intros, but if you have anything to add, do you feel your accomplishments were celebrated by your community, and how did that support look at the beginning of your journey versus now? And what was that like for you? How about Emma? We start with you. You just finished off, and then Ariana, and then Shanae.
Yeah, I thought for a community that was uncomfortable with me wrestling in the beginning, they, after a little bit, they're like, she's not quitting, so I guess we'll just cheer her on. And so they did make space for me. They protected me. My older brother was on the team, and so he made sure that I wouldn't get beat up, or someone wasn't unnecessarily too rough with me. It helped that I was a lightweight, but he protected me. The community was pretty good. Although I was doing pretty well in women's wrestling, it wasn't recognized as a sport in my high school. So whatever I did on my own outside of the boys wrestling season didn't matter. So when our guys went to state and they placed, they got banners on the wall. When I went to state, I didn't even get a coach. I didn't get a singlet. They didn't help me pay for travel, hotels, anything really, entry fees. And so that was tough, but my parents just believed that it was worth the time and the investment. And so thankfully they would get me to states and nationals and to various events. Looking back though, my cousin is a sophomore at the same high school that I went to, and they have a women's wrestling team. My cousin started it, and they have 8 girls on their team. My cousin won state last year, and they held a parade through our community, and they have a banner on the wall with a big picture of Ellie. And it just is kind of full circle to see her succeed and be proud of her. Cause I think for a while she felt like she was kind of living in my shadow, but it's you did this, you built this team. You've earned this respect and this title, and the community's done a great job of being you know what? We're so proud of our women's wrestling team. They're the forefront of all of our promotions for our women's, or for any kind of wrestling in our school. So it's super cool.
So for me, growing up in the Bahamas and in the swimming world, when I was younger, I don't think it was something that I really noticed. And I think it's helpful that this movement is happening where women in sports, and we're really celebrating that. But I would go to competitions for the Bahamas, smaller Caribbean competitions. And I would win like 8 gold medals or whatever, but the newspaper was always talking about the boys that did really well. And this boys relay won. And then I was like, well, what about me? And then I would be like a little tiny piece in the newspaper. And then I think kind of as I got older, people were like, oh, she's not stopping. Okay, she's going to keep going. And that really was helpful, like seeing the Bahamas support me. And once I went to the Olympics, I remember when Facebook was still like really big. I mean, it probably still is. I'm old. I don't know. But I remember I was getting messages from so many Bahamians that I've never even met before. And they're like, hey, you're in our prayers. We're cheering you on. We're going to be up. And this was in the Olympics was in Beijing, and it was like an 8-hour time difference. And people were like, we're going to be up. We're going to watch it live. We want to support you. And seeing all of that happen was super impressive. And then kind of knowing that swimming in the Bahamas is not that big of a sport. Track and field is like our biggest sport. And so the Bahamas Olympic Association always really supported the track team. And the majority of the track teams people on the track team that they were celebrating were males. And so after kind of going through 2008 and continuing to improve, I kind of got a seat at the table, a tiny seat, but a seat at the table for the Bahamas Olympic Association. And then as it continued, they were like, oh, okay, maybe we should support swimming. And seeing them give a lot back to the swimming community was so exciting to see that it wasn't just me. I mean, there were other Bahamian swimmers that were really making an impact and making the Bahamas sit back and say, oh, okay, we do have other sports here. And it was really cool. In 2008, I think it was myself, another female, and then 2 other males. And the rest of the team was track and field. And then in 2012, it was track and field. We had boxing, we had sailing, we had rowing, we had swimming. And so it was really cool to see, like, I think just beyond swimming, the Bahamas Olympic Association was like, oh, we have other sports here. That's cool. And we've had successful basketball players come out of the Bahamas. We've had successful baseball players come out of the Bahamas, but for whatever reason, the Bahamas is like, we've got track. And so it was really cool to see, like, in the experience, like, there's a Bahamian woman that's coaching now at NCAA Division I school. Like, it's really cool to see, like, women in the Bahamas got that chance to really say, hey, we're here too, and we want to sit at the table. So between 2008 and today, it's a 180 change.
So those are all incredible stories. I think that for me, again, being somewhat of like the rookie on the panel, right? Gora Game, we've only been around and doing programming for the last 2 years. I've been coaching for the last like 18. I can definitely say that, access to gym spaces, and I kind of touched on it before, but I do want to bring that up again because it is such a issue around sometimes liability, sometimes insurance. It's like before, I felt like I used to have to beg for folks to give me a chance to bring in my like tribe of young girls and their families. And so one piece that has really worked was, again, you're gonna get a lot of no's just in general with just about everything. But one of the things that really helped me with respect to trying to gain better access for my particular program was partnering with the New York City Parks and Recreation. And partnering with New York City Parks and Rec was able to not only help very specific sites with their membership goals or contributing to it, right? But also this idea of like, how can I contribute to community membership at other respective sites, but also being able to implement my program? And again, parents, families don't get charged anything. They don't get charged for participation. They don't get charged for t-shirts. They don't get charged for sports bras. They don't get charged for anything. So the idea is, how can I bring more of those champions for opportunities for girls that really want to step up and show the importance? How can I do that in a way that can build more partnership with other community organizations, right? But also some establishments, right? Like college and universities here in New York City, we have 1 billion of them. Why is it that we don't necessarily have access? And I think, again, there's always this long, daunting process of having to apply just to get a chance for them to say it's $400 an hour. I can't afford it. Sorry. So I think that for me, that's been an interesting challenge. Since the Nike commercial, again, I'm going to be completely transparent. there's been millions of people reaching out like, hey, we want the program here. Hey, but I also have to be very careful because just as much as those no's came in for me early on, I have to be very selective with who I'm choosing to have access to my program, because I know and I can already see the track that we're going on. And it's really important to make sure that I'm not only protecting my girls, but I'm also now having to protect my brand. So, you know, that's been a very interesting journey.
Great. Thank you all for sharing that. So what lessons did you all learn in sports that you feel helped you most in life? Let's start with Shanae, if you could kick us off, and then we'll go with Emma and Ariana.
I think for me, it was about finding a way to like understand the validity of my voice. Ever since I was young, my parents used to always have to speak when spoken to, right? And it's not about being disrespectful, right? So I want to make that clear for some of those that are, you know, Gen Zs out there. It's not about being disrespectful. It's about just understanding the validation of your voice. And so from my experience of being able to not only play, but now to be able to coach, I actually find myself being the coach that I always wanted to have, was lucky enough to have in most instances. And I think that that's a really big piece, is making sure that young girls, and it took me some time to realize it too, understand just how powerful my voice is and how valid my feelings are, right? I may not be feeling good today, and I may not want to go 100% today because I'm literally not feeling good. And as a coach, my coach is going to understand that and not tell me to suck it up. Right? Because I think that, again, you're telling me to suck it up. You're not hearing my voice. I'm not making excuses for when you're actually trying to be lazy, y'all. So don't get that twisted either. But, you know, for certain situations and circumstances, I think that that's really important. And so without a doubt, there's so many transferable skills, but for me especially, and also the way that I give back to my girls, it's understanding the validity of our voice and challenging them to continue to speak up.
And for me, I would have to say it starts with like just hustle. I was not a natural athlete. I was more of like a student. And so for me to like even be close to what my brother was as an athlete is I had to put in multiple hours of practice in addition to what he was doing. So whether we finished practice and we would go back home to the farm and I would be moving bales of straw or going out and trying to like clean up the barn or do whatever I could or shoot some hoops or practice stance and motion or just do anything, you know, to try and work on my footwork to strength and all of that kind of stuff. And that hustle kind of transferred from me being just an average wrestler to being able to go to college. It also transferred from me being an intern for Team USA to being an assistant national coach for Team USA, being willing to do whatever it takes. And just like, I'm a grinder. That's a wrestling thing, but I think it's in with all of us. It's just a choice. And then it also helped me go from now at Beat the Streets from just being a girls head coach to being a program director as well, who's trying to improve the entire system. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help all 3,000 of our student athletes, not just the ones that I have time for. And then the second thing that I think sports really taught me was just like resourcefulness and resiliency. Can I keep coming back? A lot of wrestling coaches along the way wanted to kind of break me and push me out of the wrestling room because they didn't think women deserved a spot in the room. And so I had to do whatever it took to survive the practice, whether that was finishing crying, tomorrow I'm coming back, whether it was, you know, not being able to move or whatever it was and like coping with the negative words. I just kept bouncing back. And I think that was a big piece of it. And then it was also just the resourcefulness, right? Like I couldn't always get to practice. My parents owned a store. They also had the farm. So sometimes I just had to work. I had to help out. And so like whatever I could make practice out of, I would, whether it was the pogo stick, whether it was lifting bags of feed, whether it was how many times can you walk a cow in a circle? Because it's not very willing to walk. So you're pretty much dragging it. Right. And so like just, you know, like a lot of just like whatever I can make out of it, I'm going to do. And that served me as an assistant national coach. You know, one time we couldn't get food for the kids and I asked them who wanted to be a chef. And I'm like, you're the peanut butter lady. Jam it, you know, and get it going. You know, how can you make the best of the situation and just like go roll with the punches? And I think as a coach, as a human being, as a nonprofit, right, we're constantly throwing curveballs. We plan for the best, we hope for the best, but it's like never the way it plans. Like mats don't arrive on time. We don't have equipment. The food's not here. how do we take this situation and turn it into something that's positive? And same thing with COVID. We haven't been on a map, but how can we make virtual workouts engaging for our student athletes? How can we build a community in this time? And I would say those are the two things that set me apart. I will work harder than I think I possibly can, because I know that I'm serving a purpose and it's going to make a difference. And I'm determined to bounce back and make the best of every situation, because I know, again, it's a purpose. I'm here to serve my kids. So that's what sports done for me.
I think Emma basically stole my answers, all of them, but something that was kind of brought to my attention, and maybe last year around this time, I was talking to some friends and they said, well, what do you think made you so successful? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I just made the decision every morning when I woke up, I was going to grind every single day. And the person I was talking to said, well, that's part of your talent. Like, people knowing how to grind every single day is not something that everybody wants to do. And to me, it wasn't a choice that I made. It was just, I was given this opportunity to be the best that I can be in this sport. I'm going to take every single day and use it to my advantage. And so I feel like that's something that I learned through the sport. And the same that Emma was saying is, like, you have to be resourceful. You have to figure out how to be successful with what you're given. And when I was growing up in the Bahamas, there were days where my dad was working. He worked in tourism, so he was traveling all the time. So it was kind of on my mom, who ended up being my coach for a long time, but it was on her to make sure that my brother was getting to his soccer practice and I was getting to swimming. And then she was coaching me, and then she's taking us home and making dinner for us. And it was kind of all on her to get both me and my brother to where we needed to be. And so sometimes that just wasn't able. And so I have like pictures of me and my brother where we would be outside in our street, just running up and down, doing drills and doing all this stuff that we could do that we couldn't make it to practice that day. And so I think that's something that I learned. And then another thing that I learned, and I think you both kind of touched on it, is like, you have to know yourself and your body and understand the difference between, like, my body is done, I cannot physically do this. And the difference between, like, okay, I'm just tired right now, just get up. And once you get going, that's going to be the difference. It's not easy. And you were saying, like, Gen Zs unfortunately kind of get this bad rap for, like, you know that there's an out, so then they're going to use that out. So it's the difference between, like, understanding where you are at. Is it, I'm being really lazy today and I just don't feel like doing it? Or is it, honestly, my body is broken down? And it's really cool to me to hear Emma being in sports psychology, because I'm sure for you too, growing up, like, we didn't talk about psychology, we didn't talk about mental health. And now there's so much accessibility to that sports psychology stuff that I wish that I had. I came out of college struggling with a lot of things that nobody spoke about. I mean, I had race anxiety, I had depression from failure. And, like, I didn't know that there were other people that struggled with these things. I thought it was a me thing, and it's not at all. And in my years after I left college, I continued to swim. And I was very lucky to have a woman in my life who has gone on to write books about confidence. And especially in females, it's girls are often very, very critical of themselves in sports. And it's like, well, what if I lose? Well, what if I don't do my best? Well, what if I embarrass myself? And these are all these things that are running through girls' heads that are so unnecessary. I mean, you go in every day and you work your butt off and you're obviously being successful in practice. And then you get, for swimming, you get behind the blocks and you're like, oh, well, I'm probably going to be slow. Well, if you think that way, then yeah. So I've learned from swimming, and I've been able to kind of translate it into my work life now, is like, if I set myself up for success and I believe that I'm going to be successful, that's what's going to be my outcome. And there will be days that I'm going to fail. And there are going to be days where I'm going to have to pick myself up. And like you were saying, Emma, like, I might cry at the end of the day, but I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning and I'm going to be successful again. And I'm going to push it and I'm going to do whatever I can to be successful. And I think a lot of athletes, male and female, would admit that that's probably the biggest thing that you can take from sports. Is better than winning, it's losing sometimes. Is when you fail, that's when you really figure out who you are and how you can come back. And at NCAA's my senior year, I went into the 50 freestyle ranked the favorite. I was supposed to win and I came third. And that was day one of a 3-day meet. And I went into the locker room, and I was a senior captain. Everybody's looking at me like, oh God, if she swam slow, then what's that mean for us? And I was like, guys, listen, I just had a really bad race. We're going to get it together. We're going to figure it out. And I went back to the hotel and I bawled my eyes out. I went in thinking I was going to break the NCAA record, and I didn't. And I came third. And so getting through the other 2 days of the meet, I pretended like that never happened. I was like, I'm going to deal with that once I'm done. And today is today, and that's all I can take care of, and kind of figuring out how to move forward. And day 2, I swam like crap again. And then day 3, I was like, okay, what can I do? Because I'm not going to let this be the last time I race in an Auburn cap and be unsuccessful. And I just got into the pool and I put my head down and I was like, I have to crush it. I don't have a choice. And I ended up winning the 100 freestyle. And I don't even know how. I mean, I touched the wall and I was like, oh my God, help me. Somebody pull me out of the pool. But you learn to like, you got to figure it out every day. You got to wake up and you got to figure it out. And that's probably the best lesson that I've learned in swimming.
Thank you guys so much. You're just so inspiring. We have a few more questions left, but to be mindful of time, I do want to just open it up to our audience and give our students and staff and community members a chance to ask you guys some questions. So folks, if you're interested, you can raise your hand in the participant or the reaction tab, or you can put it in the chat. So I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, while we're waiting for folks to drum up the courage, I will ask one of our, oh, sorry, Naomi, you've got a question. Brandon, could you unmute Naomi?
Good afternoon.
Hey, Naomi.
Hi, I work here at John Jay College as the Director of Enrollment Management Services. And I just want to say thank you guys for coming on today. My son has always been, big on basketball with my son, playing at Conrad McRae and, Todd Gibbs. And my daughter recently, she was doing gymnastics. And I was like, okay, well, that's fun. But recently she's been picking up the basketball. And I'm like, okay, here we go again, So this has given me the encouragement to really push her to see what sport she's willing to do. Because I think a lot of times we do so many gender specific sports, which it deters from it. So like even hearing your story, Emma, about wrestling, I was like, wrestling, sometimes you have to think outside of the norm, and it's not about the female. And you mentioned it several times where you said that, with your brother being in wrestling, you had to work 2 times harder. And I kind of feel like a lot of times in women's sports, they feel that we're supposed to perform just like men, or you have to have a characteristic as a male. And it's like, no, regardless of what, we're still females as anatomy, and people need to just embrace that this is what the capability of a female is. And sometimes it can be far superior than a male, but to change the standards. I think a lot of times in women in sports, it's always a comparison to a male. And even with my husband, I had to tell him, hey, my daughter's interested in basketball now, but she might be better than her brother. She's hitting the hoops and she's more disciplined than him. Now, these days, especially with COVID, you have to compete with Fortnite and, doing drills with steady buckets or whatever the case may be. So it's really hard for that. And I think another thing I wanted to say, Chinye, with the spacing in New York City with gyms, and I know for my husband doing his own basketball tournaments for boys, they don't really want to give the space to females to do things. They always want to have like this kind of bro league. Oh, where do you play basketball? Or who was your coach? And it's like for females, it's like, you may not have had that experience. You were able to have that experience with a female coaches, but a lot of times the coaches coming out the doors are males. And if you don't have that buddy system, or you didn't go to the bars to drink with them, or went to schools where you share the same alumni status, it's hard. So just opening up the doors for not even just women, but even women of color, and knowing that you can't pay that $500, hour for a gym. How do we get places to begin to give you space and not, I mean, I know it has to be a reciprocated kind of, relationship, but at the same time, don't bank on it. Oh, I'm doing something just because they're Black and they poor, or they're Black and they're females. Just to say, hey, I'm doing this because I want to build a partnership with this team of girls, or to provide a resource that I know is not readily available. So I thank each of you, because you made me think about, what I can do with my daughter, and kind of move away from these gender stereotypes of what she can't and what she can do. Yes, as a strong Black mother, it's still in the back of your mind. How is she going to be perceived? Especially playing with basketball. A lot of times with the Black girls, they can, they're deemed as butches, or they can't wear their hair a certain way. And it's like, okay, yes, I can't wear my nails and my eyelashes to the gym, but it's not like I can't, put them on after. This is who I am. I'm here for the sport. It has regulations, but I'm a different person after I'm finished playing the game and being competitive. So thank you for sharing your experiences.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I have a question from the chat that was sent directly to me. So how do you feel about all women gyms? Many women feel intimidated by men in gyms, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on this. So whoever wants to go first.
Yeah, I can share a little bit of our experience. New girls to wrestling really struggle with boys in the room. And so my first year in New York City, we did all girls practices all the time. And then I realized that I was actually doing them a disservice, because if all the girls are in one practice, they might not have a practice partner their size. And so I started leveling practices based on like your experience and what your goals were. And so that was helpful, but I also maintained 2 days a week of gender specific practices. So they could go based on skill, they could go based on their goal, they could go based on their gender. And that made an accommodating space for all different levels, body types, genders. And so they were getting what they needed, because to serve a large population, I don't want to like pigeonhole each of them to fit what I think is best for them. It's letting them have a voice and choice.
I want to add on to that just a little bit. For me, as in the swimming world, a lot of times we see swimming females, once they get to a certain level, they feel like they don't have competition anymore. And they talk about how it's like they feel like they're plateaued at that point. And sometimes we would run practices at Auburn and in high school where it was a women's all practice and a men's practice. But if you're the fastest on the women's side, you're kind of like, okay, well, who am I chasing? So I loved having combined practices. And it got to the point at Auburn where like the coaches were like, we're not going to put you with the girls anymore. We're doing a sprint practice, because it's doing you a disservice. Like you were saying, Emma, like it sucks, but it's not fair if you don't really have anybody to chase you and to race you. So I'm a little bit biased about women only gyms. I think the reason a lot of women are intimidated is just this mindset that like we are lesser than, that has just like transpired through time. And they feel like, oh, well, if I go to a gym with a man, they're going to look at me and think that I'm not strong enough, or I'm not doing it right. And I think we just need to be confident in ourselves. I mean, even myself, like now that I'm a former athlete, retired athlete, whatever, I go to the gym sometimes and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like everybody's looking at me because I'm a girl here and I'm lifting weights and I'm not doing like small weights, I'm doing bigger weights. And so I think it's just like, as females, we need to be empowered to know that like, we deserve to be there just as much as guys do. We deserve to be there sometimes even more than guys do. I watch some guys and I'm like, haha, I could lift heavier than you. And I think that we need to like inspire younger females that like, it's fine to be stronger. It's fine. Sorry, I can't remember. Naomi was saying like, there are times where girls are going to be better than guys, and we need to celebrate that in females and don't put them down and be like, well, because she's strong and she has her hair up in a bun and she's not wearing any makeup, that makes her more manly. It's not true. Like, girls need to stop thinking that they can't lift because they're going to get big and bulky. Girls need to know that they deserve to be right at the dinner table, right with men, eating all those gains and everything. So I'm biased about it. I don't think that women should go to women only gyms. I think that it kind of gets you stuck in that antiquated mind frame. That's my opinion.
And actually, to Ariana's point, and even to Emma's point, I think that when we think about gym space and when we think about access, I actually want to get to a point with my girls where I instill so much confidence in them, right? Because that's really the first piece, especially for the demographic that I work with, which are 4 to 7 to 8 to 10-year-old girls right now, right? So from at a very, very young age, girls still feel like they are actually just as equal, if not maybe even more than boys, right? And that goes with different subjects in school, that goes with a number of different things. And then there gets to a point where they're actually better than the boys, but for whatever reason, they feel like the boys are better and they actually underperform. And so again, with our philosophy at Grow Our Game, the most important piece outside from passion and energy and what we do is building confidence in our young girls. Because again, what we're also baking into the plan is that we're going to the park and we're playing against the boys, because that's really important, because those same boys that made fun of you when you weren't as good are the same boys that are going to pick you first in gym class when you get to middle school, high school, and even college, right? So I think that there's a huge distinction about the philosophy, but also about intentionally going about it to break barriers, right? Like, again, those same girls that were like the ones that, you know, maybe cried their tears are the same amazing women now that are in C-suites and doing amazing in their respective careers, right? But again, sometimes it's also teaching the boys how to play nice, right? Don't hit us or punch us just because we're better, or maybe because you like us, right? Like, it's like all of these different dynamics that we have to really just work on debunking. And again, for me, the confidence truly starts with girls at a very young age, so that when we get older, we can kick the boys' butts.
All right. Well, Corey, go ahead. I think this might be our last question and then we'll conclude.
Hi, how are you guys doing? I just wanted to say that it's just dope to see the things you guys went through, the things you girls went through on your journeys. And so my question is, when adversity really hits you girls, what did you do to get through it? You know, how'd you stay focused? How'd you stay locked in on your craft?
I can quickly start. For me, adversity hits all the time, right? Like even now. And I think that the biggest piece that keeps me grounded outside from my faith, right? Because I don't want to get too spiritual, but my faith is a really big piece that keeps me grounded when things are so confusing and don't make sense, right? These last 12 months, my faith has taken a deeper meaning to me as we went through dealing with lockdown and the pandemic and the quarantine and losing family members and, you know, trying to figure that piece out. But I think outside from your faith, mentorship, right? Being able to have someone that you can lean on, and it may not be your family members, right? It may not be, and that's okay. It's not a knock on them. But I think that, you know, the mentorship helps because instead of being stuck in survival mode, right? Many of my family members, they remain in survival mode. So they're not looking to elevate. They're really not looking for anything outside from just surviving and paying their bills and continuing to live life. For me, my aspirations were a little different. So I had to seek different, right? And again, I was lucky enough that my basketball coaches were that, but there were also a few surprise guest appearances along the way as well. So I would also say, don't push someone away just because they may not have the same exact interest, right? So Corey, if you play basketball, don't push away someone that maybe plays tennis or maybe never played sports at all, because you just really don't know how much they can still contribute to your life and really be a support when adversity strikes, because baby, it's gonna strike. Like, I feel like I'm getting emails right now and it's like striking every day. It strikes every day.
I can follow up on that. And I would say for me, it's the idea of being hungry about something. And I try to make an effort where, and I learned this from swimming, it's like I have a weekly goal, a monthly goal, and a yearly goal. And if you have those and you keep those in mind, whether you write it down, whether you have somebody that you call an accountability partner, however you do it, keeping your goals in mind is what keeps me going when I hit adversity. Because I mean, you're gonna have days where it's like, oh my gosh, I feel like nothing can go right. And especially in this pandemic, it's been like every day is a struggle, and it's like, what else can happen? And I haven't seen my family in over a year, and I've lost some family members that I couldn't go to their funeral. And, you know, like waking up and being like, well, why am I still here? And what am I doing where I can't be with my family in the Bahamas? So it's been, I mean, I think everybody can say like they've had probably the roughest 12 months ever. But like, I keep in mind, like, these are my goals. This is what I want to accomplish by 2022. This is where I want to be by next week. This is where I want to be. And this is my son, Jackson Vanderpull Wallace, and he's very nosy. So he had to be a part of this, but, and he's part of my goals, you know, like I want him to be happy. He is the most spoiled dog in the entire world, probably. Working from home has spoiled him even more. But yeah, just keeping those ideas in mind of what you want and where you want to be. That's how I overcome adversity.
Yeah, I think I just echo. Again, it comes down to your why. Is your why your purpose? Is your why your faith? Is your why your goals? Recentering on that why is powerful. You know, when I feel most rattled, that's what I go to. Another thing that I do, we started this Blessed Bank thing with practice. Every day you got to say 3 things you're grateful for, plus a 4th thing is a challenge that you're facing and why you're grateful for it. And just trying to flip the script on like, why is this challenge actually beneficial for me? So that when we face adversity, our immediate thought isn't like, woe is me, I'm a victim of this circumstance. It's like, wow, this is a learning experience. Wow, how am I going to get better through this? This is an opportunity to operate under pressure, to practice my resourcefulness, to see how well I can refocus my attention on the things that matter. And it's been beneficial for myself as a coach because you know what, when the kids look at me and I'm rattled, it rattles them. And so I have to be focused. I have to be on my game. And also I need to be implementing those same skills into them. And I think, you know, if you can reuse your why, if you can start to practice that gratitude, your life's going to be a lot better. It's going to be more meaningful and also just happier.
Ladies, I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. You guys are so inspiring. Thank you so much for being here. You've been so honest, so forthcoming, and so real, which is, I think, really what we need in all of these discussions, the good, bad, the ugly, and the hope. So with that, we're going to conclude our program on it. Thank you all again, our panelists, for joining us. Janelle, thank you so much for co-moderating with us today. I want to thank our Office of External Affairs, who is a partner here, and our partners at Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority and their Swim 1922 program. I hope all of you here in the audience, you realize how valuable it is to recognize National Girls and Women in Sport Day, the challenges we continue to face, and the incredible strength of girls and women. You've seen it on display today. So thank you again so much, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Bye-bye.